Okay, boom. We are back for what we hope is an episode of Alfacast. Our regularly scheduled guest had some technical difficulties and unfortunately can't make it with us today. David Lonebear Sanipass was our guest today. And for those who know who he is, he's a renowned Native American healer, elder, scientist who's been on shows like Leak Project, and our friend Matt Belair, who set us up with him, has been doing a lot of great work with him. And it's kind of crazy because in Leak Project, he talks about how many times he's blocked from being able to get his message out about the Star People, the Copper Scrolls, ancient technology, and such. And here we are. We were excited to have him on. I had a lot of amazing questions for him, and unfortunately, we're going to have to reschedule that. We will get him on, though. We will definitely get him on Alfacast. Universe wants it. We want it. The whatever forces are not going to be able to stop him from joining us. But that being said, we still have a discussion today. I mean, we set aside the time to do this, so we might as well take advantage of it. And basically, I'm thinking this is a great time to get more into recent topics we've been covering, from coronavirus to this 90-10 tech, which I'm day 3 on. And it's the real deal. For those who saw my unboxing, you know what I'm talking about. For those who haven't, you can go to Alfa Vedic YouTube channel and go to the DLive transmissions and the DLive live stream section and watch that. And it's me unboxing this technology live for the first time. And it's pretty funny, but I'm like feeling it again right now. I want to get into more of this with you and give you my perspective on it, what it is. But how are you this morning, Bear?
Doing great. I want you to take your hat off. I want to see if that little gray patch of hair you've got going there is turning dark with this capsule here.
Oh, you bastard. Yeah, no.
Or was that a bald spot?
Yeah, I'm balding. No, my hair is flowing and beautiful today, thanks to 90-10. So, no, it's me. Me and my hair. We've talked about it in the past, developing technologies, and we've actually been contacted by a couple different people about other different things. I should look up this message I got in terms of regenerating hair. But yeah, 90-10 is gonna give me really thick hair. I'm feeling it. So, anyways, I'm loving this.
I have to admit publicly that I do regularly go to the hair salon and put a frost in my hair so that I have that nice white distinguished look. Otherwise, my hair is jet black like yours there.
I knew it. I knew you were hitting the salon. You sly devil, you. I had a roommate in college that actually did that. Went and got his tips frosted. Shout out to DJ John Hogg and your frosting tips. But yeah, man, where to start? You can see it in my face still, dude. And I just got hit up by Philip. So for anyone who's listening who doesn't know what the heck we're talking about, 90-10 is this new technology we covered in our Alfacast last week. You can go watch that podcast. It is doing very well on our YouTube and on our iTunes. We're getting messaged about it a lot. People are very interested. And so I don't want to do a total recap on that. Just go watch it, and you can come back and listen to this after. But it's a new quantum energy technology out of Switzerland that our friend Philip is helping bring to the States, and we interviewed him last week. And I ordered one of the products, the power capsule, that I received 2-3 days ago now. It was on Tuesday, and it's changed my life. I mean, it's that simple.
That doesn't look very digestible, though, and it looks pretty big.
So my youngest was like, because inside this there's 5 titanium quantum powered spheres, and you can hear it. Hear them in there. When you walk around, I sound like I got Tic Tacs in my pocket or something. But and I want to get. It's sad. I don't even have like a good leather strap or a band or something. I'm gonna be wearing this right here moving forward over my heart chakra. But my youngest Teo was like, my wife was like, "Don't give that to him. He loses everything, and he'll lose those little balls." And he's like, what do you eat these? I was like, give me those back. No, you don't eat those. It'd be interesting to know if you ingested one of those things, what would happen to you.
Knowing Teo, he'll be using those little balls in his slingshot.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, man. So what are you up to these days? And did you order your 9010?
I did. I got a water bottle and the capsule. So I'll just see. I've been, as I was telling you earlier, I love the people involved with this. I have a really good feeling about them. They're doing a lot of other good things. I really believe they're genuine and for real. And I understand how the technology works. I've also been around the block a few dozen times. And so I always hold myself in reserve because I've seen so many things come and go in the tech and health field.
Yep.
And been hopeful for a lot of things in the past that didn't pan out. Some things do pan out. I really believe we're ready for what this purports to do. And I think they've got some really good minds on the Switzerland side of things that, I think they might just make this happen. So anyway, I've got mine coming. I got a water bottle and I got the capsule, and if all feels good, I'll get a cube, when I want to spring for the big dough. But I'm gonna have my own experience. The other thing is, I won't get into it all now unless you want, but I have my own ways of testing things as far as their effects on people, and real definite ways to see how it changes energy fields. And of course, we're talking about energy fields here, and energy fields. Not to make it sound woo-woo, because energy is actually waveforms that we can talk a lot about and actually measure.
Yeah, no, actually, I really do want to talk about that today. And Russ in the chat here was asking if we saw the interview that Philip was in, where they talked to the man from Germany that sees frequencies. That's the Sarah Westall interview, I believe. I haven't watched the whole thing, to be honest, but I do plan on that. We are very familiar with Sarah's show, and that is interesting. We know, of course, there are people that can see frequencies and that are more tuned in. And yeah, as you know, Bear was just saying, these are waveforms, and some people can wow, this is hitting me again right now. It's weird. It comes in waves. Speaking of waves, man, I can't wait for you to get your power capsule, Bear. I'm really interested to see how you interface with it, because the one thing that I'll say with this is that it's really, we talk about quantum, the quantum that gets so overused, and how it's just thrown around. And the one thing I'll say is this: what we talk about a lot on the show is how we've been, waiting for this new eruption of technology where consciousness really interacts with an analog technology. And that's the one thing I've noticed, is that you literally tune into it. So as I become more aware of it again, and as I focus on it, and then it gives me a feedback, and it's a very palpable for me feedback, where I almost got hit with a wave of energy right now. And so it's, I'm really interested to know more about what you think in terms of how you can measure that and relate that through your own studies and what you do in the lab.
Yeah. Seeing, we'll get to all that. Seeing energy shouldn't stretch anybody's imagination either, because we relate seeing to using your eyes, and your eyes, of course, are part of your sensory apparatus. And we think of that we have five senses, right? Hearing, taste, all that kind of thing. If you read Rudolf Steiner, he elaborates the five senses into 12 senses, which makes more sense when you understand what he's talking about. But then when you go beyond that, this is a big topic, so forgive me, I'm going all over. With what Rudolf elaborates on as far as 12 senses, is expanding the five senses beyond their normal perceptive bandwidth, we'll say. And in reality, there's only one sense, in which case you should be able to pick up the frequencies, for instance, in your ears, and you should also pick up what all the other five senses are picking up simultaneously just through that one sense. In fact,
Hmm.
people that lose
Interesting.
faculty of one of their senses, like they're blind or deaf, they do frequently report that they can perceive those nuances within just that one realm, and be able to, for instance, see things through their hearing, taste things through
Yeah.
their hearing. So our problem,
That's one of my
our
favorite
whole,
superheroes, by the way. Daredevil, the Marvel superhero, he loses his sight from an energy blast, and then he's like a superhero martial artist because he can actually sense things faster through exactly what you're saying. In that terms, almost like a bat, uses radar technology, but even more in tune. And it's almost interesting, not to interrupt, sorry, but the fact that our eyes can deceive us in many ways. We get too reliable on eyesight, I would say.
yeah, well, seeing, for instance, as an example, is perception. For instance, you're looking at a distance at a train coming, down the track, maybe a mile away. It's just a little speck and it looks very tiny, right? And then it gets up close to you, and the sound and the size and everything, your perception changes to accommodate that. Now imagine if you were thrown on this planet with the same sensory apparatus and you had no um, programming to decipher what you're actually seeing. You would explain what you're seeing with your eyes in a completely different way. So our senses are really programmed by our belief system, first of all. And what I was going to continue saying on about was that the nature of our problem here is the predicaments that humanity finds itself in all the time is because we're really schizophrenic. We have this propensity to divide things up and see parts and to separate things. So going back to the senses, it's actually only one sense. And then we perceive them as five different divisions of sense, or 12 divisions, take your pick.
Hmm.
Um, when when you heal that, or let's just say when you annihilate that veil that exists in all of us, there's two main brains, we'll say, that we represent in the physical body, but in reality are holograms or representations of other things on larger scales, for instance the mental plane and the feeling plane. But let's just call it the heart and the mind.
Mhm.
And we have divided those two are supposed to operate as one unit as well. And because we've created a separation, we have this great schism, this polarity between our two sides. And there are methodical ways to chip away at that so that you start using them as one. And in other more enlightened realms, there's actually a hand signal that uh, people use that signifies that heart and mind is one, and also just a way a salutation between people that are within that level of understanding, even though they don't have to have a salutation because two parties in that realm of consciousness already know, but that's just what they do, kind of like the little secret handshake, right? But anyway, senses, you have to also understand the way we think of them are also a fabrication. So they are a device. And, I use this example all the time. Just like if you have a video game, in order to play the video game, you have to have a screen and a joystick or whatever in order to manipulate, the figures, and then also to get feedback on the screen as far as how you're doing in the game. That's all the sensory apparatus is. So no more than somebody playing a game, even though people really get real about those things. But no, that is no more, our senses are no more real than that. And of course, if you are playing a game, you aren't going to, just really take it serious, when you're finished with the game, that, oh, I was really in that screen, or that thing is really real. It's just a feedback mechanism. So in the simulation that we talk about all the time, and it is a simulation, this isn't a far-fetched idea or theoretical. When you know the physics behind it, it's much more logical, congruous, and easy to understand than what a lot of us learned in school, even advanced sciences. So within a simulation, and at the soul level, of course, and the reason why we put ourselves in the simulation, what we're doing is having an opportunity to have a very rich and intense feedback as far as how we're using our consciousness on that mental plane. And then, of course, when we use it responsibly and in an enlightened way, then we tend to create, which all it is waveforms. It's no different than bits of information that make your computer do what it does, so you can see things on the screen. But then when we're in, balance and not operating from toxic emotions or superstitions, then our waveforms coming directly from our consciousness will represent or mimic those waveforms that we have all around us in nature, which are very symmetrical, and things just seem to work out that way. And if we, are operating differently, then we create those symmetries that, create all of our problems, disease, war, and so forth. And of course, disease, as an example, good example now because everyone's freaking out. And even if it's a bioweapon, which it is, it's still on another level is a thought form. And that thought form then holographically represents into this little bug, because that's the intentions of the operators and the innovators of that bioweapon. But still, if we understood that that is happening on the mental plane first, and also for us to succumb to that kind of virus, we have to allow our mental plane to be, we have to supplicate our mental plane to their design. And that can only happen is when we think that what we see in front of our eyes is real, going back to the senses. So when you understand what it is, understand how everything gets here in the first place, and then if somebody is trying to do you in, which they're trying to do right now, then you can simply, and I'm not saying I'm there or it's an easy place to get, because we're all been programmed like crazy since birth. We bring into this lifetimes of programming, and it's not an easy task, but that's why we play the game, and it's not supposed to be easy. You go into a gym because things are difficult, and you get a kick out of going there and challenging yourself. So that should be, our kind of demeanor when we're facing all these things we're facing right now. But more than anything, as the old saying goes, get ye knowledge, because the more you entertain the truth, even though those programs might seem to die hard, they will die the more you surround yourself with the truth, seek the truth, aren't afraid of the truth. And then when, those bioweapons are coming at you, they're spraying us, with all the crap in the sky and everything else that they're doing these days, then you understand, well, I am also a holographic, representation of my intentions and thoughts and past products. And I don't have to, believe that that's who I am. I'm the one that's putting all this into effect. I'm the producer, director, and writer of my own movie. And I sure don't have to be an actor in somebody else's movie if I don't want to. So that's a lot of rambling.
I would say that
Any
was
thoughts or
definitely not,
comments?
well,
Yeah.
that was definitely not rambling. That was right on point. And every time you go into one of your quote unquote rambles, I learn something new, or I have a new eye-opening kind of a awakening there. And really what it becomes obvious is we're living in the greatest analog video game. And it's exciting once you kind of just come to that realization that we've chosen to come in here for this experience. As you say, it gives us this really kind of intense feedback for our consciousness, because everything is so vibrant and alive here because of the density. Whereas, you know, when we go back to source, or however you want to, religion wise, heaven, or whatever you want to relate, when you're back to that pure consciousness, you're kind of more in a, from what I can gather, more of a blissful kind of pure state. And then you go, okay, I'm ready to go back in. You know, I'm ready to jump back in. It's like going to the virtual reality arcades now. It's a great kind of way to look at it, where you put the headset in and you go back in. And like you were saying, you know, it seems really real, but also, you know, you can like kind of push the boundaries and do things, because, you know, in the end, what's the worst that can happen? You get kicked out of the game, or you lose the game, or you die in the game. And then you come back out and you go live your life, go do your things, and go, God, I want to go back and play that game again. It was really challenging and hard and kind of scary, but I'm kind of bored now and I want to go do it. So that's kind of weird how on the digital realm, we're getting more and more we're seeing us trying to create that simulacrum through the digital space of what really is reality. And it's funny, last Saturday, I just wanted to kind of untap, and it was kind of, you know, kids were asleep, wife passed out. So I hadn't watched this movie in a long time, and we talk about it all the time, and it just kind of came up in my Amazon feed or whatever. And I watched The Matrix, and I probably haven't seen that in good 12, 13, 15 years. I mean, I remember seeing it in the theater when it came out when I was in college, and just, you know, blown away by it. And actually, I had been working on a short script in film school about a really interesting guy who's kind of breaking through the code, and in the end he wakes up and he's a fat blob in this tube with all these things plugged into him, and he opens up this lid and he looks and he just sees millions of these tubes with fat blobs in them, and we're all being farmed. And I was working on this short script, and then when Neo rips open into the real world, and I literally yelled out loud to my friend, I'm like, that was my idea. But you know, it's you watch that and it still holds up, and that's the thing. He sees the code, he breaks through, like you were saying, he defies the senses. It's all, I mean, that movie is so on point. Everybody should watch that movie again if you haven't seen it in a while, because it is so on point. And it is weird that the Wachowski brothers or whatever, or now the sisters, what's happened to them, but I've heard rumors that they're coming out with another Matrix or something. They're working on something, but anyways, you're right on point there with everything you're saying. And it is interesting to see how the digital realm is really trying to co-opt this and kind of force us into bringing it back to Steiner. What's he call it? The 12th sphere or the 8th sphere?
Eighth sphere.
Yeah, the 8th sphere. And that's kind of the battle right now. And that's why I was really bummed we don't have David on today, because he talks about, I think he calls it the conjecture. It's something that the Copper Scrolls, the Star people told him about, where there's this AI presence built within the digital realm that's trying to literally control us. And whether that's related to things like coronavirus or whatnot, it doesn't really matter. As you said, they're thought forms on the mental plane, and that's someone else's story. And in the end, they have no power over us because we're infinite analog beings. So yeah, it's just so many places we can take this. But the one thing I'll say about having this with the senses and stuff is, with this 90-10, is it really like slaps you across the face, like, wake up, there's way more to your reality than you know. And immediately, you know, I was going into a lot of coronavirus fear porn stuff at night, just because it's just interesting, and you get kind of funneled into it. And a lot of the alternative space is not helping with that. And, you know, since I've gotten this, I'm not attracted to that information much anymore. It's like, I don't care. And people can call that naive or irresponsible, but I just don't care. I don't know.
Yeah, you know, back to the Game Boy analogy. This is a very intense game, and it's really not a game because there's a lot at stake. It's real for what it is, but it becomes, of course, less real in contrast to our true selves that are projecting all this in the first place. We'll just say it that way. And there's an old saying where angels fear to tread. And the true meaning of that statement, its origins, were that there are exalted beings, hierarchies of intelligence in, we'll just loosely call it the universe. And in this simulation, not every level of consciousness or being decides, because we're all here of our own free will. You know, we all made the decision to come here. And, you know, I see a lot of people that are having problems and they just, you know, like, what's the point of being here, and feel kind of victimized by the whole thing. Well, it's like, well, you know, we made the choice. You know, we want to be empathetic to people that are suffering, but at the same time, we all have to someday say, I'm here because I chose to be here. And there's no accident as far as, you know, the entirety of my life circumstances have a point. So let's get on with it and figure it out. But there's in teachings that are very old, that have been around since the beginning of time, they talk about how the souls that decide to incarnate into this realm are, you know, when they complete the journey, which might take hundreds or thousands of go-arounds, when they come out the other side, they are considered a very esteemed, we'll say, you know, I'm just using kind of ego type words, but for lack of a better way to do it, esteemed within, you know, levels of consciousness, because of the nature of this intensity allows rapid soul expansion that would not be possible in any other way. And of course, our soul is nothing more than the individualized Akashic record of our journey. And, you know, we talk about, when you get into the physics of things, there are little portals that, when you get clever and understand what they are, that are represented in the elemental world with inert gases. You know, those represent the Akashic records of, you know, the modeling clay and the collective creativity of everybody who's creating on this realm. And so, but the soul is our individualized record, and every go around we have, of course, has that memory. You know, a lot of, in the past, I worked with some people, and we actually developed very real ways to help people recall from past experiences. It's all there. And I did that for a while, and it became very accurate, and something that we could, you know, facilitate readily with anybody that would, you know, desired to go there. And after a while, I realized that there's no need to go there. And in fact, there's dangers, you know, just like if you overstay your welcome with the therapist, it might have been great to go talk about your problems, you know, initially. But if you stay there too long and you're talking about the same problems with your therapist, you know, years down the road, well, you're just keeping yourself in the story. So past lives, you know, when that became in vogue, and by the way, the first time I ever had to recall myself was somebody from a different culture that I did an apprenticeship with, who regressed me through some things. And in that culture, and because there was a point to having me remember something, and in that culture, it was never done frivolously, and only if the person facilitating it understood that there was a point, and this isn't something you do frivolously. So with the past life regression that a lot of therapists and people are doing these days, and kind of new age healers, all that kind of stuff, again, it has, well, it has a couple dangers. A lot of times it's just bullshit. I mean, I've heard so many stories as a practitioner, people coming in, oh yeah, I found out my heart condition is because I got stabbed when I was a Roman centurion. And I mean, I've heard the same things, you know, and then of course everybody's always somebody famous, but you know, real past life regression, you know, really isn't necessary, because everything we are is a conglomeration of everything we are right now in present time is a conglomerate of everything we ever have been. So if anybody is curious about, all those things that, create this embodiment, or maybe things that have contributed from past times, just like different times in this embodiment, just forget about the past, live in the moment. And how the hell did we get on past lives and everything? We're talking about people that could see energy. Now, those are, just like when you are using a technology, computer technologies or cameras or whatever, you're just picking up vibrations like our senses do. Then there's ways of recording that. What those technologies really should be telling us is how life really works, and that everything we're experiencing, this physical world is nothing more than, or no different than a computer program, only on a more elaborate, unlimited way. And so what we need to understand is that we are the original technology, and we can create anything we want, including the ability to be impervious to all these things that are going on these days. And people that can see energy have done nothing more than to deprogram themselves, just like the Shaolin monks and many traditions in the past, where they go through severe disciplines in order to suspend all prior programmings, beliefs, and emotional reactions. That doesn't mean you become zombie-like, but then you tap in to that place where your heart and mind are no longer divided, and now you can perceive beyond the veils, including, just like Neo in the Matrix, you can see the code instead of the outpicturing of the code. And Mike, you're a computer guy, you're a tech whiz, and darn well that all the stuff that you create for our website and all your other projects, it's you're looking at the coding all the time. You're not so much fixated on the end product. That's exactly what we're doing with our sensory apparatus. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll be quiet here, the Matrix, there's another guy out. Have you seen him where he's claiming that he was the originator of it? And he goes into how the brothers, now there's another woman that also made that claim.
Say that the woman.
Yeah, but it didn't pan out, and I guess it wasn't true. But now this guy seems to really have even court documents and everything, and where the brothers have had to admit in certain proceedings and so forth. And so it looks like those guys did hijack his work. And then he goes into the true meaning of a lot of what his original story was about. And I haven't delved totally into it, but heard a little bit. He's making the podcast scene these days. And it seems like it would actually be cooler than, especially, Matrix 2 and 3, which I think they, lost the thread and just went Hollywood.
Oh,
but
totally.
one, kept a lot of the authenticity, I think. So back to you, Mike.
Yeah, no, definitely 2 and 3 just got straight up hijacked. And interesting, I don't know, I wasn't aware of that. I think we've actually talked a little bit about that. And the gal before, she said that she had actually did the Terminator and the Matrix were supposed to be together or something like that. But
which is a cool idea.
Very cool idea.
So Neo was the kid in the Terminator.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. And it makes, it all makes a lot of sense. Whoever developed it, that's why I love sci-fis, because it gives us that representation, that analogies that we need to kind of recognize what really is the reality around us. And it's one of my favorite genres, or the sci-fi / fantasy conjunction too, because fantasy plays a lot into this realm as well. When we're talking about things like ETs versus things like fairies or jinn, it all is kind of the same once you realize how the simulation works and how these varied levels of intelligence can exist here. One thing that I always struggle with in terms of the reincarnation, or us, when we say us, seeing us as a species and how that relates to human consciousness and us as humans versus these other entities or whatnot. How is it we as a species are evolved? Are we all, I mean, I know we talk about this, we're all just really one consciousness, but then we have our individual sovereignty, our understanding of individualism. I always have an issue reconciling that notion with the collective consciousness, and then us as like a species. They talk about, and this is kind of more on the new agey side, but also on other different levels where we as a species are evolving together. I always just find, I don't know, relating that, why, for instance, why can't I reincarnate as a fairy or reincarnate as a, I don't know, as a plebeian or as a, from the Pleiades, or maybe we are from the Pleiades, but I find issues with that, how there's different, for instance, when you get in the more alien stuff, the different races of aliens, right? The Anunnaki and the Greys, etc. Why is it that we reincarnate as humans? What makes us associated our consciousness as quote unquote human?
Well, the thing that differentiates us is conscious intention and free will, and the ability to self-realize. Rudolf Steiner had a way of explaining it, the difference between human and other species. And by the way, you can't reincarnate as your dog and that kind of thing. And I hear that all the time. And no, that doesn't happen. It's a different level of consciousness. And to really understand that, you'd have to get into another story, is how animal life actually got on this planet in the first place, which was not the original design on the planet. That was an after effect that came about through certain events, and what you would think of as kind of a fall of consciousness that leads to our present state, and then with it created a lot of the animal forms, which are literally as much as I love animals, my dog and and everything else, and I don't like seeing everything go extinct, but they are certain levels of human emotion trapped in an embodied form. And for instance, you can look at a dog and a cat. Well, two different polarities, right? And when you see, and that's why animal totems and understanding animals as spirit guides. There's really a lot to that, because native cultures understood that when a certain animal came across your path, that it was telling you something. And there's nothing random in this universe, and they were exactly right on. That's another great whole podcast just talking about that kind of thing. But each animal also embodies a certain essence, and in essence it's not negative, but in essence it is kind of a more of a, we'll say, a lower emotional form. And the reason why dogs, cats, and certain animals are being domesticated now, and why we have such great love for them, certain sources say, is that we are helping free those animals from that entrapment, so that they can just be returned to universal. Of course, they don't have the ego that fears ego annihilation and the things that we surround the concept of death with. But when we intensely love them and care for them, then that raises that frequency of that energy field and releases them back to universal, which is part of the natural design to return this planet to the way it was originally intended, without any kind of what we would think of as lower chakra stuff. And animals, face it, they are kind of lower chakra beings. So there was somewhere else where we're going with that.
But the lack of ego is a great point, though, and how they kind of just exist in this pure, this wonderful form of just accepting their reality, and whereas us as this higher consciousness, we actually create these like you were saying earlier, it's almost like a schizophrenic view of reality. And that's why going to nature is so powerful, because we can see them just interacting with the informational fields in a very just kind of natural way. Whereas we, as the controllers of the informational fields, but have lost that knowledge, we're like these schizophrenic, beings here that often cause a lot more problems. And we could actually learn a little bit from our dog or our cat. But yeah, you're right on there. And so interesting. Yeah, I'd love to explore more about the spirit animal and how we each kind of connect with the type of animal paradigm, if you will, on a podcast. But kind of taking it back full circle here, to things like
To Rudolf
coronavirus.
Steiner.
Well, to Rudolf Steiner, yeah.
Um,
Go ahead.
Let me just finish that thought real quick because I rambled way off into the animal world there. Rudolf Steiner explained it as at one point, when you're about 3 or 4, you stop saying, Johnny wants this, Johnny wants that, and you say, I want this, I want that. And that is a very specific line of demarcation where now you are self-realized. Animals don't do that. You are now, as soon as you say I am, that designates you as a creative, individualized force within a coordinate of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you're sitting over there in your house and I'm over here, and we aren't really in different places. We've created different simulations. What we are on the different levels, we're different coordinates in consciousness. And I can't interfere with that level of consciousness in your world. Only you can. I can't change anything. I can manipulate the hell of you out of the ground on the ground if you go for it and if you take it. And that's what's happening on this level. And that's why people that reach that more, we'll say more enlightened state. And there's, many stories of people that have gotten there, and even tens of thousands more people have gotten there that you never hear stories about, that you can't pull their chain anymore because, they see through it, and there's really no way you can touch them. And then if somebody, it would be like going back to the playground when you're in 3rd grade and somebody calls you a name or pushes you, if that, might have got you back then, but if that same 3rd grader came up and said or did the same thing, now you just kind of laugh and say, little kid, So, that's, you can't go back once you've reached a certain level of realization. You can't start to unknow things once you know them. That's the danger of being a seeker, because once you've had your eyes open on a certain level, even though you realize you're still, deaf, dumb, and blind in a lot of other ways, you're starting to get little glimpses, and everyone says the same thing. Say, I can't go back. I'd
Exactly.
like to, it would be easier. I'd like to take the blue pill and, just forget about everything because there's less responsibility. But, that's, some people want to go there. And that's why a lot of the folks out there, and this is a great polarization that's happening on the planet right now, other people are scared to death to go there. So when you try to open their eyes to certain things, or even try to, engage them in a civil conversation, they get pissed off at you and just start reciting ideologies or what they heard on the news or something, or casting pejoratives or, ad hominems at you right and left. And that's the great division we have going now.
Yes, very true. And those that choose to take the blue pill or go back to the blue pill in denial of this knowledge tend to then unfortunately, in that paradigm are the ones chatting and freaking out about coronavirus, and are stuck within those frequencies. And I'll never go, that's what's crazy about doing it back to 9010. It's like, it's weird. It like opened up this new realization about these energy patterns for me. And it's like, I'm interfacing with it. And one thing I'm noticing about the 9010 is that I've lost that short fuse. I was talking to my wife last night about this, and it's like, we all have our tendencies, our things that we need to work on. And one of them for me is I tend to have a short fuse sometimes because I have high expectations for other people around me, and I'm trying to get stuff done. I'm very busy, and if somebody gets in my way, sometimes I'll snap. And I mean, this is true with our business and stuff, and it's something I'm very aware of. I'm hyper aware of, and I'm work on. But it's tough sometimes. We all have our little quirks and stuff. That's gone almost. I mean, like, I'm so much more chill, and like it's not in my resonant fields anymore or something. It's so weird, man. Like I'm better in the morning with my kids. it's not just like having more energy. That's the thing I was trying to explain to some friends yesterday. It's not like you just have more energy like you smoked a bowl or drinking coffee or something. It's a different frequency of being. We're talking about hijacking your system in a way that probably would take years and years and years of meditation, yoga, etc., to get there. It's like a hyperbolic extension of that immediately. And I think it has to rely, of course, on you consciously being there ready for it. It's like if you just give this to somebody who's just watching CNN all day and worrying about the Bernie winning the election and like, which is fine, that's cool, that's your deal, whatever, no judging there. But if you're like really in tune with that and not spiritual at all, maybe this won't have that same effect with you or whatever. But on a side note, and I'm not trying to turn this into a 90-10 commercial, by the way, and we have no affiliation with them. We are not representing them, etc. But I gave this to my wife last night. Well, no, the first night I gave it to her, and I relayed that on the last video I did. But last night, she kind of was, she works long days. She's a nurse at a crazy hospital with lots going on. She's a charge nurse there. So she's got a lot of responsibility, and she's a great nurse. She puts all of her effort and energy into that. And I know it wipes her out. And so she comes home, and I was charging her bottle of wine yesterday. And I was like, I charged your wine, so let me know how it is. Because she had a bottle that she wasn't crazy about. And so she's sipping on it, whatever, not really noticing it. And so I just take it and put this in her pocket, in her sweater pocket. And lo and behold, I can't get it back from her. She's kind of walking around, like disappears with it. She was feeling it. I know she was, and she was enjoying it, and she had it for a couple hours, and I'm glad she did. I think she got great benefit from it. I finally took it back from her. It's like, we got to order more of these things. So anyways, even for her, and she's like this angelic being, a beautiful soul, and is kind of really already way evolved and it's funny, she's never been into politics, never been into any of that stuff. She's just in the present and just vibrating on a higher range. But she doesn't vocalize it, but I know she was enjoying it. So anyways, that's my 2 cents on that. I'm having some digital artifacts in my voice. I'm noticing my mic, so I apologize for that. I don't know what's going on there. But anyways, back to you, Bear. Really quick on the coronavirus stuff, for those who are still really concerned, and kind of on a brief topic here, taking a little more pragmatic here. It's empowering to know that there are frequencies out there and there are things that can be done that can counteract any kind of these quote unquote viruses or et cetera. And the quantum stuff, the stuff that you are involved with, and taking it back to what you said in the beginning, how you have actual modalities or techniques where you can kind of visualize and measure this stuff. As you get hold of the 90-10 tech yourself, could you walk us through kind of how some of that works and how we can relate that to those who are fearful right now of something like a coronavirus, and how there's much more to medical science than we're often told, and how you've been using this in your practice for decades, and how we can kind of relate that to 90-10 and coronavirus?
Yeah, I'll try.
That's a big question. I know.
Use a lot of things. Yeah, I use a lot of things, everything from labs to microscope, and more the last couple decades, antennas. So we call dual impedance antennas, and they're like a DNA strand. And I've talked about this before, but here we go. Your DNA is calibrated. It's 2 strands side by side like this. And then you have cross bridges, that make each DNA strand unique and also receptive to different frequencies, or waveforms is what they actually are. And the dual impedance antenna that we use, it was created by an Austrian physicist, originally used for engineering, still used in engineering circles today, allows you to calibrate the instrument, which is also like your DNA, to parallel antennas, but with a calibration unit that can go in different numerical ranges that we know have to do with different dimensions of waveform mechanics. And it can be adapted to engineering or to medicine, which there are, not a fair amount of medical doctors throughout the world and throughout Europe, few in North America are starting to catch on. India, has kind of caught on. But what we can do, for instance, Michael, if you were here, or if I had a drop of your blood here and you were still over there, then I could use this instrument. And by knowing the calibrations and the settings, I would go through a pretty lengthy process where I would look at many different levels, which have to do with dimensions that we understand for the human body, have to do with everything from endocrine, emotional, biochemical, anything you could possibly think of. And if we get a positive reading, then that means that particular dimension has asymmetries. And, if anybody has a hard time believing that something like 90-10, and again, I haven't had my own experience yet, but let's just give it the benefit of the doubt because I know of other things out there that do it, and I'm hoping this is the next level. But if you don't think that people can be affected by frequencies, well, anybody who just gets out of their normal environment, goes for a walk in nature, goes camping for a while, gets away from it all, as soon as you're out in that setting, you're bombarded with a very high magnitude of the natural patterns, which are nothing but waveforms emanating from nature. Now, you can't destroy those original patterns. We can put overlays on them, but then those overlays are very weak. And just like a homeopathic medication that's lost its potency because it was made a long time ago, our overlays are kind of like that. But the natural substances that those homeopathics come from, those, again, are in the Akashic records of nature, and then they will always overcome anything we can throw at them. So that's why when you go out to nature, you just feel good. All of a sudden you calm down, everything, you forget your troubles. And now the technologies like the 90-10, as is purported, is doing nothing but having the ability to project a magnified pattern that more mimics something in the natural order, which can overcome your overlays, that create all the problems in our world, the toxic emotions, the superstitions, and also even, cleanse things like foods and supplements of any things that they've picked up on and make them work better, make them taste better. So it's not that big of a stretch for anybody, but isn't it curious that people can just have their own experience of the things I'm talking about, but then not be able to extrapolate that to technology, that it would be possible to create things that could project similar things to make us, heal and to make us feel better, when in fact we carry around all these other technologies all day long that we take for granted and just say, oh yeah, they work. Yeah, computers work. It's like somebody denying that a computer, their iPhone works. No, it works for what it is, even though you don't know how it works. But in fact, they're just creating, everything we're talking about in order for you to have a technological version of the same experience. So back to the dual impedance antenna. Once I do a reading on you in person or do it with a drop of blood, then I take a lot of notes along the way, and I, chronicle all those areas, where you've got issues as far as those asymmetries. And then I could take this 90-10 capsule, for instance. I could put it on your body and do another reading and to see, and that's just one way where I could see, or put it in the vicinity of your blood slide, if that's what I'm measuring, as a representative of your DNA, which is no different than having you standing in front of me, then I can see what it does or does not correct. And again, that's a technology created by engineers, used by engineers and medical doctors worldwide, gets results. People that have taken it and applied it to medicine and figured out how to do that. We're given the highest awards in France for scientific achievement. So there's a lot of things that you don't hear on legacy media. And if some of these technologies were known, we'd be having completely different discussions out there. We wouldn't be entertaining the same fears, and we definitely wouldn't be at each other's throats or arguing ideologies. So another way that you can use this antenna is directly on the capsule itself and test it directly as far as its inherent the waves that it's inherently projecting in the first place, and see what kind of readings you get on that.
Yeah, very interesting. And empowering. It's so great to hear you talk like that, and so people can realize there's a lot more than the allopathic model that is the mainstream, where we belabor this point, and the point of our entire podcast is getting this information out. It's just so much broader spectrum in terms of healing, and really we're all empowered to heal ourselves once we can actually understand how this all works through our own consciousness. And you're a great example of that with the podcast we did about limes, and how you went in going internal and figuring out yourself. And in the end, that's what it all comes down to, is dispelling the fear and diving into the knowledge, so that we understand that really this matrix, this simulation, is all controlled by us. Consciousness really, it's the driving force of all reality in the universe. And something that would, like 90-10, what I believe, with this, what they call those toroidal field or whatever, all that is that's a representation of a pulsating consciousness, which is the energy. We are the energy that powers the universe. And it's super empowering. Walter Russell's a great one to read, that really, puts this into a very clear picture scientifically. But it's so empowering, because we are the drivers of our own reality. And there's so many gurus and stuff and people out there that talk about this all the time, but you don't need the gurus. You don't need us. All you need is this awareness in yourself, and you can go out and explore and tinker yourself with these ideas. And so, yeah, going to nature is a great way to do that, because it just allows these fields to open up and be very obvious. So, getting out and going camping, or going mountain, trail hiking, or doing a backpacking trip, and all that is so empowering and awesome, because it just slams it in front of your face, that this is the way reality is. So very cool, man. I'm just super pumped on everything right now. It's so wild how this technology has just allowed me to get out of the fear matrix a bit, because I get sucked in the alternative media. A lot of people I really respect are victims in the same way. There's a great channel that I shared on Telegram, Quantum of Consciousness. And while I don't agree with everything he says, he does make a great point about that, how almost a lot of these alternative influencers that are really like more on the conspiracy side, or on the whatever, they're almost worse in some ways than your average Joe guzzling beer and watching football, because at least that person guzzling beer and watching football isn't living in so much fear. They might be more entrapped in the ignorance, but they're also kind of more zen in that way, in that they're just kind of living their life and having fun, at least. Like, there's such a varied spectrum. So having awareness and knowledge is important, but also letting go, living in the present, living in love and light, and just enjoying your life is probably the most important aspect of this, because that's what's going to allow you to really wake up and really see these patterns everywhere and enjoy them. Otherwise, why are we in this simulation to begin with? Obviously, we're here for growth, spiritual enlightenment, and all that. And what comes with that, and what I'm realizing with this, is that, and one other thing that I always kind of struggled with the spiritual awakening, and we see this issue a lot in those circles, is that a lot of those spiritually awake folks are miserable. They're miserable because they're so focused on being spiritually enlightened that they trap themselves from going out and having a pizza, or going and watching a game, or you know, enjoying certain things. And so I was always thinking when I was reading the Ascended Masters teachings and stuff, and they, you know, basically not drinking alcohol, which I don't do anymore, but a lot of this fun stuff, I'm like, what are you just like vibrating in this like blissful state? But do you enjoy art? Do you go watch a movie? I mean, those are all stuff I really like. And really, as you read it more, you realize, no, you enjoy all that. Like one of the things, it's a concurrent theme with Saint Germain's books, is they love music. And Saint Germain always has them playing music, and they do concerts and stuff, and obviously music and audio frequencies and stuff play a major point into a lot of this, and we could actually kind of relate that into Rife if we wanted to right now. But it's important to enjoy your life. Don't let the fear take it over, and everything will be okay. Everything's going to be okay. So that's my rant on that. But it will be interesting tying in Royal Rife to 9010. I know there's people in the Telegram chat that are talking about that all the time. So anyways, what were you going to say?
Well, no, it's just, again, it all comes down to frequencies, and it all emanates from the same place. And if you look at 9010, I mean, this stuff is so logical, and that's why I think it escapes us sometimes. 9010, how did that technology get here? Well, somebody kind of tapped in, understood some certain principles, and made a technological version that works. You know, an iPhone works. Why can't you make something that works that will override, overlays that are going to, just help you have a happier day or help you heal your body? And you're absolutely right on. You know, some of the hardest people I ever had to treat in my old clinical days was, these people that had very rigid ideas, and they're, purist, with everything. And they'd come in and they'd have dark circles under their eyes and have body odor and just obviously not healthy, and had a hell of a time healing themselves. Whereas, and then of course the thing you hear most is, oh, I know so-and-so and they're out doing this and that, and, they never get sick. It's like, well, yeah, they're having a good time. That doesn't mean that you just go out and abuse your body, but there's a happy medium there. That's why studies have shown, people curing themselves of cancer just by sitting around and watching Abbott and Costello movies and laughing their ass off. So when you get to a point where you just eat certain foods, that happen to be maybe organic or unadulterated, and maybe your inclination towards certain types of entertainment are a little bit more refined. You don't do those things because they're good for you. You do those things because they taste good, because they sound good, because they feel good. And so, sometimes you kind of dip your toes in the water with new lifestyle habits. And, but then after a while, you're doing it just out of the sheer joy of doing it. I have people all the time saying, how the hell do you go out and, run 440 repeats on the track? I mean, those are brutal. It's like, well, yeah, it used to seem brutal. And, but then it got to a point where it is actually fun, just kind of pushing the limits. And, taking a sports car out and just seeing what it's made out of and how fast it can go. And there's something very primal about, just using your body in certain ways. But if you haven't trained yourself or adapted your mindset to certain things, then it seems like work. No, I've got to exercise because it's good for me. No, those are the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
So 9010 is here because somebody had an idea. The computers that we're all on at this very moment are here because somebody had an idea. The roof over our head is there because somebody had an idea. Now that idea on the level of the simulation required a little elbow grease and, people coming in with certain tools that knew how to use it to implement the idea, but it all started with an idea. And isn't it interesting that all ideas have to have a picture? If you're an architect or a musician or anything, you have to have a picture on some kind of level in your imagination in order to bring that into manifestation. And I think it's real curious and not coincidental or accidental at all that now we have a scientific community that says, oh, imagination is not real, when in fact everything they're doing, everything they're learning, everything they're using, their entire experience is a product of their imagination or somebody else's imagination, but that's not real. We have to have double-blind studies and that sort of thing in order to prove that something's real. And then, of course, in order to conduct that kind of experimentation, you have to use your imagination and make believe like you're not there participating in it and influencing it in the first place. So, I mean,
wow.
All that we do is so, it would be laugh out loud funny if it wasn't creating such tragedy on the planet. But it's time that we really see things for the way they are.
Yeah, and speaking of science and innovations, I can't wait till, I know we probably already have the ability to do this, but where we can actually prove to people these concepts by, and not that I really care about proving to anybody, I really don't anymore. I'm beyond trying to prove to anybody anything. But with the notion that thoughts have weight, thoughts are real energy, just the idea of thinking has a weight. And when you and I put our thoughts together, that has more weight and more weight and more weight and more weight. And as a community, when we all put our thoughts together, it has more weight. And so the manifestation is more immediate, at least from what I'm gathering. And so to have the actual hard science to show this, I don't know how this can be done, but literally having people in a way where we're thinking, and we're seeing this in like parapsychology and things with, like I mentioned, like Dean Radin, the Institute of Noetics, where they're doing things with the quantum realm, where they're showing how thought is actually affecting random number generators and things like that. And they're showing it with statistics. That's a great start. And in the end, I don't really care about proving. I think everyone's on their own journey and it should be your own self-exploration. But I think also it's important because the more that we can get more of humanity, more of these of our conscious friends to understand these concepts, the faster the overall matrix will convert to a more holistic, friendly environment for everyone. And things like the negative spaces from quote unquote governments, the corporate entities, and everything that are creating this darker realm will go bye-bye, because we just will manifest that. So yeah. It's kind of like that's why we're all about science. We need science. Science is super important, but we also have to understand that science in the main, as it's defined in terms of its own, many of the scientists, as you say all the time, is only half the equation. So we need the full, real broad spectrum science, which we know is coming. And 9010 is a great example of that, where we understand that as an observer, we must step back and must have a grander view in terms of how we take this data in and apply it versus just the traditional scientific process of viewing the data from a singular sensory perspective. And we're getting there. We're getting there.
And science is a two-way affair. We try to take ourselves out of the equation to prove our own reality. And one half of the equation, which people like myself had to learn in school, should be called scientism. It's a belief system with no way of self-verifying, no matter how much they try to pretend they do verify things, which is the reason why everything science is based on these days are theories, and these theories are never proven because they fail to understand that the only way you can prove things is inside of yourself. And then, of course, you have the skeptics, from the show me state that say, oh, well, you show me. Well, no, nobody can show you the truth of anything. You have to experience the truth yourself. And, what you were explaining earlier was the 100th monkey theory. And you're saying, well, when a couple people have the same idea, you get together, it gathers steam. Well, actually, it's exponential. And Walter Russell explains that exactly how that works, where when you jump from realm to realm, he does it. He's talking about elements on a periodic table. But when thought manifests, all you're doing is creating pressure that then creates the vibratory action that then will, our senses can be aware of within the simulation. But it's a pressurized, a stratification of pressure zones that finally pops it into our simulation, and then we get to experience it. And when you look at those pressure zones, which would explain gravity and all these things that science still can't wrap their mind around, but these pressure zones are like a pipe organ. And as you build up the pressure within the pipes, then you reach different octaves and different tonal fields in every octave. And in our reality, with our thoughts, we're doing the same exact thing. And then that's what not only allows things to materialize, but materialize in a very nuanced way with all the intricacies that we, experience with life. And when certain people are projecting ideas that are more authentically aligned with nature and with the truth, again, those just inherently carry a larger energy field. And when people start sharing those things, then just like an individual creating, then that collective experience becomes even more exponential to hit those pressure zones where you hit a reality. So now all of a sudden, even though you have 3% of the population that's entertaining a different concept, all of a sudden one day you wake up and all the rest of the herds are acting like they've always known it and doing the same thing. And that's, what we're embarking on right now, is the 100th monkey. Way back in the 70s, when I started becoming aware that the whole thing's basically a lie. And when I say the whole thing, I'm not just being flippant saying that. The whole thing, everything we think is true is not. And even William Casey, back in the days of the early CIA, and they publicly tell us these things. He said, when everything people believe to be true is not, then we know the CIA will have accomplished its mission. And that's in fact what we're facing right now. All of our institutions, from medical to educational, political, they're all upside down and inverted and backwards. So back in the 70s, when I started looking at some of these institutions and finding out firsthand that they weren't what they appear to be, we started getting involved in groups in education, just like we're doing now, only we started filling up some big rooms and it turned into auditoriums. And back then it was a big thing just for people to really comprehend it. Wow, the Federal Reserve is actually private, and it's the most pernicious, pervasive, sinister system of slavery that's ever been instituted on this planet, bar none. And this is what their true agenda is and where it's leading us to, which, by the way, is happening. It's culminating right now, folks. So don't keep too much money in the bank. But back then, it was, it was like really pushing the envelope idea. We knew we were really on track because we had ways of working with people on the inside and validating things firsthand, and actually working within institutions and testing out what we thought was true, and having that experience. But then we knew we were really on mark when we started getting raided by the FBI, getting thrown in jail just for sharing information. And then had to move our venue offshore so that we could meet in foreign jurisdictions. But they ended up finding us there too eventually. Long story. But when people can't, and people say, well, okay, everything's kind of crooked and fixed and everything, but what can I do about it? You can't fight City Hall, and what good is it to know this stuff anyway? Well, here's the deal. If you can't even see that everything that you're experiencing in your life within the simulation is contrived and manipulated by people that are farming you literally for your energy, just like in the Matrix, if you don't know what those institutions are really doing, then how are you going to move on to the next level of understanding of some of the things that we're talking about? So a lot of us, just didn't, like on YouTube and on the internet now, you can hear about all these things that I'm alluding to. But we've always stayed a half a step ahead. It's like, okay, we've got information. What do we do about it? All right, let's practice real medicine. Let's learn real science. Let's seek out, different sources and then test it out in real life and see if this stuff actually works technologically, medically, socially, financially. And, then from there, what's the next logical step? Well, you see how everything is put in play, from the first place. And that's why these days we talk less about the Federal Reserve and everything, even though we see the whole thing imploding and a lot of people are going to really lose their shirts in the process. But, the only place to go now, because it's already too late, because people didn't wake up enough to accept those truths, the only last place, and the reason why we painted ourselves in a corner as a species is because it does leave us only one place to go, and that is to understand that we are pure consciousness. This is all our collective creation, and we can change it at any time we want. Will people succumb to this coronavirus? Yeah, we don't know how bad this bioweapon is, how far they're going to push it. Part of me wants to believe it's not as bad as what we think. And that, they're just using this as an excuse to, blame a failing economy and all the things they put in motion themselves. Another part of me knows that they have some real nasty bioweapons. I haven't experienced one in the form of limes myself that can, really harm you physically. But either, we don't know those things, and we're just going to all have to wait and see. But in the meantime, we do know one thing, and it's the last thing I'll say, is that there's one last place to go, and that's to figure out that you're not a victim of anything, and we don't have to, walk around with sandy wipes and, board ourselves up into the house. And there's a great video somebody put on our Telegram. I loved it the other day, where that woman's out in public and she sneezed. It was a spoof somebody did. Did you see that one?
Oh gosh, yeah, it was, G Factor posted that. It was hilarious.
Yes, yeah, it was funny. And so they're at a bus stop or something, and everyone's just sitting there reading the paper, and maybe 5, 6 people, and this woman turns around and lets out a big sneeze. This one guy pulls out a gun and shoots her, and everybody else pulls out these sprays and they're spraying her, and so she's laying on the ground dead. And then they all just pick up their papers and everything and start reading again. But that's
What's crazy though
very
is
apropos.
that apropos, but that's also when I was still geeking out on the coronavirus fear porn, I watched like an hour straight of just China, of Wuhan video coverage, and some of it is probably fake, which we found, but the guy who sourced it is pretty legit. So it was a lot of like, and they're like, not to demean these people, they're going through hell, and I have so much empathy for them. And I would just, to be honest, if I was one of those people that grew up in Wuhan, I would already be way gone. I just know, for me, I just couldn't. That's why I got the heck out of LA. It's like I just couldn't live in a city like that to begin with. But it's very dehumanized behavior there, and almost like, man, I don't want to say like insects or something, but the way that they're all behaving. And I'm seeing one of the concurrent themes was a lot of men punching women. And it was shocking how human behavior can turn on a dime like that when fear overtakes things. And it was just, it was like watching a really bad horror movie. And I couldn't turn away, though. It was so compelling because it was such an amazing or such a frightening study on human behavior. And we don't know what's going on with that. And they're fumigating the city nonstop. And I heard through some reports that they were doing that all the way back in September. And, we're seeing the spread of this thing through the fear matrix. And what's really interesting, what people were posting on Facebook last night around here is that it was really clear last night, and you could see the new SpaceX satellite project going over our town. I guess you could see it over Europe last night, but you could see it from here. And they've launched that, and they've got hundreds of satellites together to bring internet to the world.
Wow.
So isn't that interesting? My clockwork starts going. We're having this worldwide quote unquote pandemic right around the same time as they release this new technology that's beaming down these frequencies. So, we're dealing with the massive polarity concentrations here, where on one side we've got, I'm sorry, but I'm going to say idiot companies like Tesla and these morons that are developing this dirty technology with something like the Tesla vehicle, which, your people, these, you know, people are driving around and thinking they're saving the world when really they're sitting on top of a very damaging EMF array of frequencies, while they're buzzing around in their car. And we know from like Justin Franson, who was a guest on this show with his EMF Rocks company, and he's a really renowned trainer and practitioner that works with professional athletes, and they've seen it. They've seen the degradation of health in these athletes that in Orange County and LA that drive these Teslas. They've seen the hard science show it. So anyways, you see this, you know, the conjunction of all this moving forward with these digital dirty technologies, and then how we're seeing it disrupt the natural flows of life. On the other spectrum, we've got stuff like 9010. We've got a reemergence of Rife technology. We've got stuff that you talk about, the dual impedance antenna technology. I mean, there's so much on the underground that's bubbling to the top of real analog tech. And that's really where we're moving towards, is analog tech that interfaces with consciousness. You know, stuff that David was going to be on today to talk about with the copper scrolls, and how they really, you know, how they were able to lift 1,000-ton blocks with their consciousness to create the pyramids and all that stuff. That's where we're going, and that's where we need to go, and that's the future. So
yeah, it's what's too bad David Lonebear couldn't be with us. We're all experiencing technological karma on both sides. We had a little bit ourselves, but he was taken completely out of commission. But we'll have him back. And the reason why we have people like that on is, you know, I've found in my experience that I've had to unlearn a tremendous amount and then go to other sources to find out the truth. And it seems like a lot of the best sources of truth are from cultures that have kept the truth alive through oral traditions and haven't been bastardized by, you know, vested interest and that sort of thing. So David Lonebear is a walking, as he calls it, an archivist of history that has been passed on to him generationally and from people all over the world. He's had audiences with the Dalai Lama and just a lot of interesting stories. So we'll get him on here, and it's important that we just keep networking with people like him and some of the great guests we've already had. We've got a lot on the horizon that we'll get in here, really. People known in different fields, you know, their expertise and just remarkable things they've achieved. And then we'll just sometimes shoot the fat like we're doing here today. So I hope today was somewhat interesting. Mike, I'll let you decide if you want to put this up, if there's something worthwhile for people to listen to. But we'll be back next week. What do we have? The mushroom guy, or what's?
yeah, we have
is that Levon?
Levon Doer, and from Fungaya Farms out of Humboldt, California. And we were lucky enough to have him do a workshop up at Alfa Vedic Gardens last year. So a year ago.
Last year.
And it was wonderful.
About this time.
Yeah. And we had a packed house, and people got to learn about the wonderful world of mycelium, and is it fungi? Is that fungi? And we did a wonderful workshop where people got to go home with plugged logs of mushrooms. And it was a great event, and I learned a lot. And, you know, he's a wonderful fountain of knowledge in terms of this intelligence, because it really is an intelligence. And we're going to, once again, it just connects with everything we talk about. So that'll be fun. And then we'll reschedule David, maybe hopefully for the week after that or something. We'll figure it out. I'll get in touch with them, and then we'll just keep rocking and rolling. If anything, we hope you get a little inspiration out of this chat today. We know there's a lot of fear out there, and it's very easy to get sucked up into it when it's all around us. But hopefully, you know, with the guests that we have on, we're really trying to open people's eyes to all the possibilities in this realm, and really inspire you to go out and yourself and explore it. And that's really, that should be the takeaway, is that it's all up to us as individuals to first do the self-exploration and come to this awareness. And then together, obviously as a collective consciousness whole, we create the new reality. So it's kind of a dualism there in terms of the I am. And then once the I am is better mastered, we have better tools than to be us, the collective, which we all are the same consciousness collectively connected anyways, just like those mushrooms. So as above, so below, man. Hey, so anyways, great chat today, Bear. I think this could be this. You guys tell me in the chat, should this be an Alfacast? Because I think this was podcast worthy personally. But let us know in the chat here if you think this is worth putting out as an Alfacast, and we will. Thanks everyone on the chat today. If you're listening or watching and you want to be involved on the chat, you can join us on dlive.tv/Alfa Vedic every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can also join us on Telegram, t.me/Alfa Vedic. Go to alfavedic.com to get all the information, all the links to all of our different portals, and etc. If you want to support us, you can buy our products, which Bear's been testing and developing for years and years and years with all his clinical work. And we have amazing products on our website. You can also join the co-op on patreon.com/Alfa Vedic. That's a great way to support us. But if you look in the show notes, you can see all the different ways to support us, from the Brave browser to joining us joining our community, really. But if you would like to support us financially, you can come on to DLive here and tip us. You can go on to our Patreon and join us there, or buy our products, and we really appreciate that. Thanks to everybody for joining us today. We are getting word, yes, Alfacast, post it please, it was good, lots of little gems, yes, post it. So, okay. Hey, thanks to all you guys. You are, this community is growing, and you guys are just what we feed off of. I really enjoy you guys. I love all the interaction we have in Telegram, and it's really a special thing here. So appreciate you, love you, and you guys have a great day. Cheers.